competition I've been doing. It's called the World Scholars Cup. And I've been doing this avidly for, let's say, the past 2 years. And throughout this competition, I've learned a lot. Not just academics, as it is an international academic competition, but also socially. How to interact with different people, how to view disagreements, and how you can end up connecting with people you never thought you ever could. Hi, my name is Rainbow Lee, and I've been a scholar for the past 2 years, and I've learned so much about so many different people, but not in a way that you might have thought. I want to go back to one of my favorite moments, to when I was carrying the United States flag onto the global round stage during the closing ceremony. After a week of competitions, implementing everything I practiced for the past few months, but also connecting with scholars from around the world. And as I carried that United States flag all the way up to the stage, where I was surrounded by 20 other scholars representing their own countries, I found out I embodied the entire US. The good, the bad, and everything in between. And around me, the 20 other scholars were showing the culture, the people, and the traditions of their own countries. So during that moment on stage, reflecting on everything that has happened in that past week, something clicked in my mind. The understanding that we have been taught so many different things, from different facts and opinions, but soon enough, all of these become preset biases and opinions within us. And when we take these preset opinions and apply them to when we first see something, we get this tainted view. So throughout that week, when I first entered that same theater hall, I had those preset opinions with me. But over the course of that week, I grew to learn that empathy and understanding can take one much further. Now, sadly, most people don't believe me when I say that. And that's because of something called social media. Social media loves to use something called echo chambers to ensure audience's attention. Now, what are echo chambers? Echo chambers are basically the barrier around us that essentially tells us that we are 100% right and everyone else is 0% wrong. And this barrier, what it does is essentially tell us that our facts and opinions are the only ones right. And that's because we choose who and what surrounds us. Now, based off of these decisions, the outcome of this is that it makes it hard to collaborate, to have discourse, and also almost impossible to find a middle ground. Which is why I'd like to introduce to you my idea of flags. Flags are the first thing you see about someone, whether it is how they dress, how they think, or what they talk about. All of these first impressions make an impact on how we view them later on. And the problem isn't that we have flags, because everyone carries them. They're easy to notice, which is why it's not the problem that you notice them. But the thing is, they're hard to ignore. And what people do when they notice the flag is that they end up having those preset opinions that we've talked about before, these flags, and making it harder to connect with people. And psychologists have found out this is because we have something called thin slicing. Thin slicing is the human's ability to make judgments about someone in 1/10 of a second. And this judgment, we don't make it on just about anything. According to this Harvard psychologist, Amy Cuddy, she found out that we make it on 2 factors, warmth and competence. Because of these 2 factors, we end up creating a story about a person before we've ever met them. And everything they say after just becomes evidence for that story we've already built. And of course, we aren't stuck like this. Our brains have something called neuroplasticity. That neuroplasticity is built off of the experiences we have. And it allows us to change our own actions. So we don't always have to be stuck having that judgment about someone in the first 1/10 of a second. And how can you create these experiences? Well, one thing I have been talking a lot about today is about how individually we have been impacted by flags, how the flags impact us. But one question I would like to ask everyone is, how many of you end up adopting something simply because your friends told you so? Now, this simple action leads to another, where we end up also avoiding things because our friends simply told us so. Now, it isn't wrong to try to connect with your friends, but the problem is that we start creating these natural echo chambers because we don't look at things through our own natural lens. We end up just adopting exactly what our friends think. So, as I've been competing around and going to different areas, I've also noticed that in specifically youth spaces, we have this natural tendency to be around those we enjoy. So that is our peers, our teammates, our coworkers. Because of this action, we end up going deeper and deeper into that echo chamber. So instead, during a recent Model United Nations conference, I ended up spending my 2-hour lunch break, instead of talking to my own friends and my own delegation mates, walking around the conference venue with my competitor. Yes, the person I spent the past 2 days arguing with about different international topics. But this time, instead of arguing, we were conversing on his view and mine. And just through that simple conversation, I expanded my own worldview. I got to learn a lot more than I ever thought I ever could. And it wasn't that I decided to talk to him because I thought he and I would have similar ideas. Because believe me, we did not. And instead, I wanted to apply what I learned on that World Scholar stage. Because on that stage, when I looked around, I noticed there were kids representing countries that were sometimes in war or in constant conflict with one another. And even despite all of this, they ended up standing right there as if nothing had happened, and backstage talking to each other just as kids. And those simple conversations is led to why the program existed and how the founder, during the flag bearing ceremony, stated, every time the flags were waved and each flag touched each other, similarities appeared between the countries. Because we aren't completely different. So, everything I've said today is mostly about how flags are easy to notice and how people immediately judge on them. But what can you do once you notice these flags? The main thing you would be able to do is to go ahead and converse with them. And be actually curious, as if you're in a classroom with learning your favorite subject. Because that natural intellectual curiosity is exactly what can make a conversation go from defensive to actually learning. And there's 3 steps that you can take to doing this. 1, immediately when you meet someone, go ahead and say out loud what the flag you notice. For example, I just assume that everyone here really enjoys listening to TEDx talks. Well, that may or may not be true. I don't know that. But because I verbalized that thought to you, at least you know what I'm thinking before we go ahead and argue about this later. And number 2, in order to continue the conversation so we aren't just left on that awkward thought, go ahead and ask at least one genuine question, because that will kickstart the conversation. So instead, I could ask, so why do you guys come to this TEDx talk? Or what's your experience with TEDx? Because that can start a conversation so I can get to know you beyond your own flag. And 3, because we want this neuroplasticity to work, you have to do this at least once a week. And this is just to ensure that it becomes a habit, so you don't have to think about asking these questions every time you meet someone. So, after all of this today, instead of the popular saying, don't judge a book by its cover, I think it's time we start saying, don't judge a person by their flag. Because as soon as we start going ahead and interacting with people, discovering who they are beyond those flags, we can create a pathway to discourse that has never been opened before. So with that, after my speech today, I want you to turn to the person next to you and look at their flag, but also understand who they are beyond that flag. And together, we can start an international conversation. Thank you.